you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And we are the GymWits. So what have you been up to lately?
Been a pretty busy stretch. I've been able to work out a few, solid times.
Yeah.
Perhaps not as much as I would like, but pretty good. Then in 2 weeks, things will taper off a little bit, and I'll have some more time.
And in 2 weeks, things will pick up for me. I won't have as much. Well, hopefully, I'll briefly not have as much time, and then I should have more time because I'll be kind of making my life a little bit more efficient with work. So
Imagine if we didn't have to sleep.
Yeah, I've thought about that. Right? That's like a third of your life, it should be a third of your life.
Yeah.
Probably not near that for me. But yeah, it would be nice not
Get a
having
lot
to sleep.
done, right?
I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a different reality.
Yeah, it would be. But I guess it's necessary, and it's nice. But yeah, it's true. It's like, what if we didn't have to sleep? Like, how would our days be structured different? Are there any animals that don't sleep?
I mean, I don't know if certain microorganisms sleep.
I don't know. Good question. Well, anyway, I saw a good movie this weekend.
Oh, nice one.
What's it called? I'm forgetting now. A Quiet Place.
Oh, nice.
You seen the previews for that?
Yes.
It's really good. I recommend anybody, if you're gonna see it in a theater. It's one of those things. There's an experience. It's something you have to experience in a theater because obviously, as the title suggests, silence or close to it is kind of a character in the movie, and kind of drives the story. And so there's an experience being in a theater with the silence where you can hear someone chewing popcorn, and there's kind of an anxiety that kind of, because the silence or being quiet is a theme in the movie, it extends itself into the theater. So you're actually in a weird way, you're kind of like a part of the movie.
Gotcha.
And it really, I thought it was really good. It was pretty short, scary when it needed to be scary. Tons of tension because of that kind of gimmick, I guess.
Nice.
But it really, really works well. So definitely recommend it. And if you want to see it, go see it in a theater, not at home where noise and on your phone and doing all that stuff. You definitely want to see it in a place where there are no distractions and other people around who are just as
unless the other people are annoying and distracting.
Fair enough. Although which we did have somebody next to us. They were kind of whispering to each other, but again, when big portions of the movie are silent, like you don't have a freaking conversation, no matter how quiet you think you're gonna be.
Yeah.
There was a point I was in the reclining chairs, and like I wanted to move my chair back, and I felt self-conscious about like pressing the button to move the chair back. So it worked out well. So yeah, definitely recommend.
So I know you have a couple. First, it feels like we don't do too many old school style GymWits episodes.
Yeah, we really don't.
So we have Tony, which I guess is becoming the new old school, right? And then we have so many cool interviews.
Yeah,
that people are.
And I don't know why. Like, I think it's more born out of my own laziness that like we could do like Ask the Trainer and the interesting studies when we do interviews. We just don't. And there's no real reason for it.
Well, I like the format of asking of the Ask the episodes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true too.
Much
I like the Ask the episodes. The only problem is we haven't really gotten to many interesting studies. So I think maybe
so
that we have
let's
to do
start with that
interesting
now.
studies. So anyway, today we're doing kind of an old school episode, not a super heavy researched episode as far as like the main topic, but definitely have a lot of our old school GymWitsian stuff. So anyway, so first study for today. So I'm going to do two. It doesn't nearly catch up for what we've missed, but we'll go with two.
Well, there's always new studies coming out.
Yeah.
So.
And this one isn't that new. I think it was from like summer of last year, but it's Oregon State University. And basically the idea is that long-term physical education not only helps with physical fitness, but also arms kids with the knowledge about how activity impacts or affects your health. It does kind of get filed under, Captain Obvious, I guess, But basically it was a 459 person sample, kids ages 12 to 15. And basically, it was a kind of self-reported, where they reported their amount of physical activity, so how much PE they get in school, and then also kind of measure their own perceptions of physical activity that's necessary. And there was a very high correlation between the physical activity and the perception of activity that's necessary for good health. And while it seems again like kind of like, okay, we'll file that under Captain Obvious, there's actually some really important kind of implications to it. So a couple other things from the study. So they found that 40% of the kids were overweight. Only 26% met the actual standards for physical activity for kids. So almost, slightly more than a quarter met the actual physical activity standards. And the problem is that we live in a world now where phys ed is being more and more is kind of being pushed to the side. So the trend is like on the decline as far as like physical activity and its importance in the classroom. It's kind of a second or tertiary class, and in some places it's cut outright. I think I forget where the percentage is, but I think it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 don't even have physical activity at all. So where this is important is, not only kids, but our society is getting less healthy. And part of that, especially dealing with more and more people and having been doing the podcast and meeting people and talking to people, like you realize that a large part of it is just lack of knowledge. And it's insane how much lack of knowledge kind of feeds into not wanting to do anything. So I find for any people, they're so overwhelmed that they'll almost rather not do anything than try to figure it out and then parse through all the information out there. So I think by arming kids at a young age with that knowledge, I think it will pay dividends down the road. And so we really need to be emphasizing physical activity and its importance to health, rather than, it's kind of like, look, again, it's like a tertiary class that's not really necessary. And if we're going to make cuts, we'll cut phys ed.
So interesting discussion about that, which we could probably do a full episode on. When we were growing up, when we were in school, gym class was dominated by athletic kids. Yeah. And kids that were small or meek or overweight were sort of cast to the side and almost didn't want to participate based on maybe being embarrassed. Maybe they just weren't as good. And just, how kids are. Yeah. So, which begs the question, and the gym teachers weren't going to get kids involved if they didn't want to be, right? We liked gym class because it's like, we play basketball, or we do dodgeball, or we do this, or we do that, right? And in high school, there was a weight class. I liked it. I liked doing weights. So, and that was actually my introduction to weight training. Yeah, me too. Right? We did running, right? And some sports, and then you could actually choose your gym class when I was a little older in high school. So there was different things, which actually is good. Now, granted, we're in New York City, and we had different facilities, so we had those options. Now, people in other states, other countries might not have those options, but it begs the question: is the gym class not structured the right way? Should it not be like a sort of meritocracy based on who is the most athletic kid, but rather what you've accomplished based on where you're at? So I believe that for high school kids, that a weight training class is actually very important. Right? But not to deter kids that are smaller or weaker, but based on, look, you started here, and do you do the technique? It's not about how much you can lift, but did you do the proper technique? Do you know the right form? Do you know the different exercises, right? And actually have a grade based on that. Now, I know that people wouldn't go for a grade in gym class, in PE, that could actually affect your grade point average. People just won't go for that. It's just not accepted. But maybe there is an importance to that, actually having a grading system that it has some weight to it, so that students are sort of forced to learn proper technique for running, for lifting, how to do exercises, how to stretch, things like that. What do you think?
Well, so I think
rather than just throwing kids in playing basketball, the strong.
Okay, so remember, our experience in PE was our experience. So I think there's a problem of, I don't know how PE is structured around. I don't know if ours was normal or the acceptable. So I tend to think that at least when we went to high school, or in junior high school and high school, it did seem more like, yeah, just go do some exercise, play whatever sport we're going to play for the day. And then you had the situation where half the kids were participating, the other half kind of sat on the sidelines and hung out. And the gym teachers didn't seem particularly interested. So I don't know how often that was the case and where. I know in high school it was hit or miss. Like, we would have gym teachers that were much more engaged and kind of set us up on programs and gave us goals, and we worked towards stuff. And then we had others who just was like, yeah, play basketball, I'm gonna go disappear. So I see your point, and I think that in general there should be an educational component, and there obviously should be a component that, I mean, really, you almost think about this. It doesn't just apply to physical fitness, but also, even in school, like, it's all relative. So I shouldn't get a bad grade in gym because I'm bad at basketball. I should get a grade based on my, participation and the work I put in. So I think that there is an educational component to phys ed that I think is important. And the kind of a value of physical activity that's also important that gets lost. If phys ed is valueless enough that schools will cut it, as soon as they need to, then what does that teach kids about the value of physical activity? So I think there needs to be a stress to the importance, but also obviously there should be an educational component, and obviously your grades should be based on your own participation relative to what you're capable of, and not like, oh wow, that guy has the best bench press, so he's going to get the A, and then we're going to grade on a curve down from there.
Yeah. I don't think teachers will really do that. Give the strongest kid the best grade. Like, I don't think it works.
Well, academically, sure. I mean, if you're the smartest kid in class, you get the best grades because you're the smartest kid in class.
Yes, yeah. But I think for gym class, people won't go for that because even though it is
it's kind of the same.
It's a little bit of a double standard.
In a way, right? Yeah.
So a little bit of a double standard. The difference is that gym class grades are not part of your GPA.
And fair enough, to be fair, like, I feel like in a weird way, like, generally the people who get the best grades, they're a combination of the smartest and the hardest working. So I didn't know many people who was like the valedictorian who also was just lazy and worked their way into it.
My school,
like,
there was kids that were
okay,
never
well,
studying.
What I was going to say is you almost have that.
Me.
You have
Brilliant.
that. You have that second tier of students that are on that level where you have that kind of second tier where they don't put any work, but they're just so smart that they can just kind of get away with minimal effort. And then you have another tier of kids who like put in so much effort and they're barely getting B's and C's. So it is an interesting situation where we do that kind of academically, but that's accepted.
Well, look, life in general is a meritocracy, supposedly. So you use whatever skills and natural gifts you have. I think that at the end of the day, when it comes for educational purposes, I don't think that works best in the gym setting because physical health, physical fitness health is very important. So if that deters certain students from learning how, I think that it's not for gym class. Once again, it shouldn't be about who can lift the most, who's the best player, but technique based, right? Do you learn how to lift the weights properly, even if it's light weights? Do you learn how to run with proper form? Did you know how to stretch, right? Not are you the most flexible, but did you learn the proper technique? I think that's a very fair grading system, and for what it's worth, people that are athletic will thrive in that system as well.
Yeah. All right, cool.
So.
All right, so the second study is the American Journal of Psychology. It was by a case study by the Black Dog Group. That basically says an hour of exercise at any intensity can help with depression. Which again, kind of know that exercise benefits on mood and mental health benefits. So the study was on 34,000 Norwegians, almost 34,000 Norwegians over the
Norwegians
course.
weren't depressed though.
I don't know. Over the course of 11 years.
I'm sure.
Well, no,
I don't need
literally the happiest country.
But there's no one in Norway is depressed. Come on, we know.
Well, it's like exactly like diminishing people with depression, right? Now Norway is the happiest country, but obviously we know that depression can strike anyone and anywhere in any situation, so it doesn't necessarily
except in Norway.
Except in Norway. My wife went to Norway, and I'm pissed that she went because I really, really wanted to go, and she loved it, of course. All right, so So basically, like getting back, so 34,000 over 11 years, which I think I've said like 10 times. What they found, the study, what they found is that 12% of these people could have prevented their symptoms of depression with exercise. So I'll use one quick quote from Professor Samuel Harvey. Says, "We've known for some time that exercise has a role to play in treating symptoms of depression, but this is the first time that we've been able to quantify the preventative potential of physical activity in terms of reducing future levels of depression." So basically what they did was they took a baseline. Right, everyone, people at the baseline recorded their levels of exercise in addition to all the other information dealing with depression, and then they also did a follow-up questionnaire. So obviously, the study tried to account for other outside factors that might impact symptoms of depression. So you have like socioeconomic factors, illnesses, substance abuse, divorce, etc. Things that might impact those symptoms. Independent of any other things. So what they found is that the people who reported no exercise at all had a 44% greater chance of developing depression compared to people who exercise only 1 or 2 hours a week. So it's pretty significant. Difference there. And one interesting thing is that there was no association with anxiety. So like if you deal with anxiety, you deal with it whether you exercise or not. Which is just an interesting side.
But they weren't studying anxiety.
No, no. So I mean, but the important thing here was the depression, and then but obviously, so I guess that it doesn't, or maybe the certain levels of exercise had no, didn't seem to have an impact on anxiety. But again, this wasn't, it wasn't a super controlled study, so it's a matter of reporting something at one point and then reporting later. So obviously there's a lot more research that would need to be done to really get to the bottom of it. Another quote from Harvey was that most of the mental health benefits of exercise are released or realized within the first hour undertaken each week, which is interesting. So simply an hour a week makes a difference. And he also says, with sedentary lifestyles becoming the norm worldwide and rates of depression growing, these results are particularly pertinent as they highlight that even small lifestyle changes can reap significant mental health benefits. So,
one thing that I'm questioning about this, and it's not a sort of a big deal because it all makes sense, is when they say once a week, but that's sort of a hard, like we created the concept of a week, right? If you think about it, so they're just saying once every, I get it doesn't matter what you start from, once every 7 days or once every 5 days.
Yes.
Because that's important, right?
I mean, if you want to,
just means,
how
like,
almost
it's like how
everything we do in life is done, based on weekly or monthly. So I know what you're trying to
discern
say.
the difference between whether you do it on on a Monday or a Friday. So they're saying it like that's the only thing. Like, what if you exercise 2 days in a row? If it's Sunday and then Monday, and then you don't exercise for another 13 days. So that's the only sort of thing I'm wondering about. Or they're thinking more of an average. If you average on at least an hour a week, then do you see what I'm saying? Like, could that be a little? Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but
It's
do you understand?
Pedantic, I guess.
It's a little,
right? Like a little bit
semantics too.
Yeah, yeah. Like I know what you're trying to say, but let's just stick with the benefit of exercise can help with depression.
On average, once a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, look, we've been operating on a weekly schedule for millennia. So
I guess so. It's just the question: does our body know that?
Regardless, like what's another?
You didn't just say irregardless, did you?
No,
you just said.
No, I said regardless.
I thought you said irregardless.
I didn't say irregardless.
We'll have to go back and check the tape.
Go back and check the tape. I did not say irregardless. But I mean, like, okay, how else would you like to measure it then? If you're not going to measure it by a week.
More based on days. So I guess it's the same. Sounds
every
semantics.
7 days. I mean,
yeah, something like
but what's gonna be easier to digest? Workout every 7 days or workout once a week?
It's sort of saying so when it's once, or if you're getting an hour in over a 7-day period, right? Then you're not confusing people to say, well, I could work out, once on Monday, then once on Sunday, and then wait 14 days and then do it again, right? So I'm wondering or maybe that doesn't matter either. So
I don't know. I think
Look,
for simplicity's sake, and again, like I said, this is not a super controlled study. So these are people reporting their.
I feel I was making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. So yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand where you're going with it, but yeah,
Just because it could be because you know that things like that can be confused. It's less about the study and more about people that are trying to do that. That people need that regimented, thing, and people can get confused.
Not really. Once a week isn't confusing.
Okay.
I mean, not really. I don't think. I don't see it.
Maybe I guess you're right. I guess you're once again I'm making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So I guess what was I going to say with that? I mean, yeah, that's it. I mean, we obviously know the benefits of exercise. We know how important it is to all aspects of our lives, and it's pretty significant. That 44%, and it also is important because it also goes to show that little bit can go a long way. Even once a week
Sure.
can go a long way to helping with those symptoms. So if if you are dealing with it, maybe it's not a bad idea. And also, I think. Again, I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't know how much exercise and physical activity is being prescribed as part of a plan or a program. But it certainly is something that should be included as part of a program.
What are the general guidelines?
For what?
For exercise that the National Board of Physicians or
I mean,
whatever
you've got the general guidelines. I think it comes out to 30 minutes of low to moderate most days of the week. It's something very kind of vague, broad, and again, it is very person specific. It changes a little bit. But I think it's something like 30. And it changes a little bit. You can do 30 minutes of light or vigorous. It could be. I think it's 90 minutes of vigorous activity a week. So it's fairly mild as far as the actual compared to what we prescribe it as a trainer.
Yeah.
But even less than that, once a week of even low, as far as this study is concerned, even low level exercise can. So you had a discussion you wanted to get to today.
Yes. As a result of my trolling on the internet, right? Oftentimes I'm just looking for good fodder for podcast discussions, but also based on discussions I've had with people over the years, really dating back to elementary school. I wanted to talk about Bruce Lee, the great Bruce Lee, and some discussions surrounding him. So I'm first off really say, look, Bruce Lee was the best. He was a great filmmaker. He was a great martial artist, right? He did some really cool demonstrations during his time, and he really was a crossover, made martial arts movies and just martial arts in general sort of a hit. But the discussion is that he could beat a modern mixed martial artist in a fight. And people seem to believe this, not just a few, but a lot of people. And I just don't believe this to be true. And we'll sort of get into why, but really more what this is a microcosm for when it comes to our daily lives and for fitness. So what do you think about the idea that Bruce could have beaten a modern martial artist?
No, I agree. I think that we see sometimes online there's kind of a
online or in real life, people
or real life. There's been this kind of
deification
deification of Bruce Lee. I mean, when we were kids, especially I think before the growth of MMA, it was kind of he was a great martial artist, but he was essentially a glorified stuntman. Now he did create a martial art.
We could say martial arts. You don't have to be a fighter to be a martial artist. I think also.
I think. People spoke glowingly of him. Obviously, Chuck Norris, who was a legitimate martial artist in his day and competed. You can't argue that.
He did quit judo after getting slammed.
No, okay. So. In his art, right? So
in his art,
he claims that Bruce Lee was good, but I at least always noticed there was some air of he was holding back what he really felt.
Of course. That goes into a later talking point.
Yeah, and then other people, I think, was it Judo Gene or some of these? Who were the other kind of well-known martial artists? From his time, who also said that he was good.
Well, Judo, he is good. He was incredibly athletic, and there's actually an interesting demo of him or a video of him either fighting his students, and someone did an analysis and said, he could have been good. He had good footwork. He had good, flexibility.
He moved great. He was a great athlete.
He was a good athlete, and that he totally could have been effective if he had trained in modern times.
Yeah.
with that being said, he didn't.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not his fault. And this is nothing against Bruce. This is about really the people that deify him and that don't want to sort of face the reality. Granted, we'll never know, but we can...
But no, I mean, I would say at the state that he was not a fighter. He was not a professional fighter. He didn't... and there's nothing proven. I mean...
And there's nothing proven
there's
except
all these
anecdotal. He fought in these
fights
Hong
and
Kong...
sparring and all that stuff.
where,
But, at the end of the day, there's
rooftops.
nothing like really competing. And so since we don't have... There's no evidence of him in actual live competition, you really can't say that he was that good. And we've seen recently guys who supposedly excelled at street fighting or whatever, and they are really just shown to be kind of mediocre as fighters. So I think there's a difference between being like, let's say, a martial artist or being a stuntman or making things look good and actually being a good fighter. And so I think it's just he didn't there were outlets and opportunities for him to compete in his time, and he didn't. So we really don't.
And there were other people who did
know.
compete.
Yeah,
Judo Jin competed.
Clearly,
Kimura went down to the great judoka, went down to Brazil, and with never having trained, fought Vale Tudo, which was MMA for the time.
There's no. It's not to take away from him. It's more like the fanboys and the crazy people that kind of like will, deify him and like, oh, he's a great fighter, he would have done great, and it's like, really, and it's weird because you see it sometimes on like these MMA forums where it's like, you guys should know better, like.
Some people say he would have if he trained for
you can say it about anybody.
True.
Like who, you could.
I never would have been great.
Okay, but you could. I mean, like we could take, let's say, any old school pro wrestler and be like, well, that guy would have been great, great MMA fighter if he had done it. It's like great, but he didn't. So that's just speculation. And there are lots of people who look great but aren't going to amount to much. How many great stuntmen are there that can do spectacular things? How many times do we see these guys that do like the weird self-defense stuff and on against an unarmed against an opponent who's going with them, they look spectacular, doing some crazy stuff, breaking legs, or at least doing all this insane stuff with a compliant person. But then when they actually do fight for real, they get destroyed. And because there is a difference between like live fighting and looking good. Yeah. Part of why I'll never be a great like fighter is like at this point in training, my technique's pretty good. Like when people will tell me like, I look good when I do my stuff now, but I know I don't have the mindset or the experience to say I'm a great fighter. So there is a huge difference because I go into fights, I'll see people who maybe their technique isn't as kind of good or as precise as mine, but if we fought, they'd destroy me because they're fighters. And so I think that's the problem, is that you really can't label someone a fighter unless they really fight and you really see it and you know what they're capable of doing, in a ring or a cage. So I think that's the frustrating thing, is anytime you hear like, oh, this guy would have done great, it's like, oh, I don't know about that. Like, did he actually fight? Because if he didn't, then we don't know the answer to that question.
So, irregardless.
I did not say irregardless.
Of that, I don't want to make this discussion about whether he would have or whatever, what makes a great fight. That's not the point. I think that there are sort of bigger issues to consider when it comes to sort of this topic. And the first thing is simply why would he not have been, why, though I just said I don't want to be about it, but more the deeper issue is, so why is Bruce Lee, if you threw him in a cage, why would he get destroyed? What's the main reason?
I don't know if that's the challenge there is like how, there's specificity is part of the whole thing, right?
That's what it is. And I think that
we're saying go into a time machine, grab Bruce Lee at his prime, bring him back to 2018, throw him in a cage with Mighty Mouse. Why is he not going to do well? Well, clearly because he's not training.
He's not trained for it. And I think that's the most important thing. And that's the sort of wisdom that we can take in our daily lives. When you want something, you have to train for it specifically. And I think that while that couldn't be filed under Captain Obvious, it's not always. You see, and I'm sure that you've experienced this, where you'll talk to someone who wants to get stronger and he wants to run faster, and you say, well, I'm going to do yoga and I'm going to do this, and they're always trying to do all these random things. Like, no, if you want to get stronger, then you lift weights a certain way. If you want to run faster, most importantly, you run. Like, that's what it comes down to. Have you had any? Can you think of anything that comes to mind where someone might have had a goal, but was going all about it all this roundabout way?
I mean, all the time. I think a good example, is people who play basketball who want to jump all the time, and we saw this a lot when we were kids. I don't know if it's the same now, but like when we were kids, everyone wanted to dunk, and people would buy all these crazy contraptions, weird shoes, weird whatever. They do all these weird exercises. They had these crazy programs to build the calves, blah blah blah, and all this stuff. And it's like, if you want to dunk, then just practice dunking. Like, just practice the movement and jump and do that more. There's a place for cross training and there's a place for specifically training, muscles. But, if you want to do something, then you got to do that.
Well, you got to be able to reach it first. So I guess there is jumping. You could practice jumping.
Yeah, well, you practice your jumping. Yeah, I mean, there's
technique.
specific.
There's technique.
No, there are drills that can help you with certain things.
But that files under. That's under specific.
You don't do everything under the sun and not practice actually jumping and trying to dunk.
Yeah.
And so there's an emphasis sometimes on all the other things and not enough on that. I have a guy who trains at my gym, and he was like, he wants to get stronger. He's been doing deadlifts, doing this, doing that, because he's not strong clinching. And it's like, well, then clinch. He doesn't clinch. He does it once in a while. Clinch is like grappling standing up. And so it's like, well, if you're not, you can do all the deadlifts and stuff you want. If you're not actually clinching often, then you're not going to get stronger, because it's a specific type of strength that you can't mimic. Bench pressing. I mean, bench pressing might help slightly, but there's like maybe there's like a 10% carryover, rate from bench pressing, where if you're actually clinching, there's 100% carryover in the strength you gain. So, there are a lot of times we get bogged down in all this minutia, and a lot of times just if you want to get better at something, do it. Do whatever you want to get better at. That's it. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get better at it. And so, that's the problem. Again, when we're getting back to this thing is, he trained specifically for one thing. You would need to train specifically for MMA in order to be good at MMA
or whatever, or combat sport. Yeah. He's just because he was a knowledgeable dude doesn't mean that he could excel at it in a practical fashion.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard for people to understand that concept. I think a lot of it reverts back to what I call the movie martial arts, and where they see someone in a movie doing something, and they see someone who's very wise, so they automatically think that he's going to be good at anything he does. It just doesn't work that way.
And I tend to think maybe he wasn't going to be a good fighter, because the reason why I say it is, if you really were going to be, there's a competitive drive that exists in fighters that is unlike any other sport in a lot of ways, and it is similar to other sports, but just maybe enhanced. And I think sometimes if you're a fighter, you want to show it. And if you're not, then you're practicing and training people that are supposed to be fighters, it just is interesting to me. It's like, maybe like there's the Krav Maga guy that has all these videos. Like, granted, he got destroyed in this fight, but at least he tried.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an element of that that's like, did he really try? Like, he could have put himself out there. He could have competed. There
was kickboxing at the time. There was different. He could have sought out Brazilian Vale Tudo if he really wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. It was not unknown.
No, granted, he had a career in Hollywood.
Exactly. Why? And maybe
that's a ton of money.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Like, maybe that's what he wanted to be great at. He wanted to show, or maybe he wanted to be a philosopher more so, and that was his best way of showing it. And that's totally fine.
And he's kind of definitely, that's the thing, is like, we don't want to bash him, because
there's nothing.
MMA it wouldn't be what it is, I think.
Partially,
to a large extent, without him there.
There's nothing against him.
It's kind of martial arts culture that developed out of his presence.
I completely agree. And it's not really about him. It's more about the perception of what other people have made.
Yeah.
And speaking of other people, sort of bringing to the next talking point, is that people are just unreliable in general.
Yeah.
And I was having a discussion with one person who was saying, "Oh, well, no, Bruce was the best. My uncle saw him, and my uncle said, oh, he was the fastest you've ever seen." And then another guy showed me a video of Bruce doing saying, oh, he could hit really, really hard, and he showed a demonstration of him doing the 2-inch, 1-inch punch and throwing some guy across the mat or whatever it was. And I'm like, well, that's completely unreliable.
Yeah.
First off, if you're not educated in something and you see something that's flashy or a demonstration that's meant to wow you, you're going to think that this guy is a god.
Yeah.
And I see it so often in life, and we can see this in the gym as well. There's actually some important examples. I see it all the time when it comes to musicians. Some guy will tell me, "Oh man, you got to hear this guy is the best. He's amazing. You got to hear him play." And I'll hear him play. I'm like, "All right, he's solid. He's good. He's certainly not amazing, but why does this person think he's amazing? Because he doesn't know better."
Yeah.
Right? He was out one night, maybe he had been drinking, or he just happened to like him personally for whatever reason, and nothing against the guy who was performing and I've made it many times. You'll say, "Oh, this person's great," and it's like, well, he's all right. He's decent, but he's not great.
Yeah.
And nothing against the guy, but he's just not.
Like life is full of unreliable narrators in a way. It's like there's, yeah.
Not the GymWits, so we're reliable.
I guess maybe not. Who knows?
Maybe not.
But no, yeah. I mean, that's also part. You're right. I mean, that's an issue just in general that people's memories of things change. Any combination of kind of the deification of him combined with the aura that surrounds it. You certainly will change your perception of things coming out. And you're right. I think if you don't know better, things that would otherwise be to the expert might be average or above average can seem spectacular. We've seen that. Yeah, like you mentioned music. Like I don't have the ear for guitar that you do. So if I can hear someone and think, "Wow, that guy's awesome," and then
you sort of know what's good
to an extent. Like I might above average. Like I can listen to somebody and say they're good or they're not, but I'm not. Where I might hear somebody think, "Wow, that's really good," you'll hear them say, "Pretty good," but it's not unspectacular. And so the same thing with like movement and you can see somebody does something like, "Wow, that's amazing," but you realize, okay, well, there's something missing, or there's or just the person is just seeing what they want to see. I mean, that's just part of it too. So you can't really rely on you can't again, life filled with unreliable kind of narrators, and that's just what it is.
One example that comes up often is at the gym, where you'll see someone who's really buff, and for someone that might not be I don't know if I'd say physically intimidating, but just like an imposing figure, you're going to think that this person is really knowledgeable and really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But this might not be this just might not be the case.
Yeah.
Right? Because the person could be genetically gifted, or maybe works very hard, or maybe he's good at training himself, but doesn't have good information or doesn't have great knowledge to give out to someone else that's not him.
Yeah.
And in fact, could give out bad information, could say, "Oh, you want to do this, you want to do that," but really it might not work for your average gym goer.
Yeah.
Maybe the person is also taking substances or stuff like that. We would see that a lot at some of our older gyms, where you would see these sort of buff guys giving out this information, and as kids we would take it as the word of God, right?
Yeah.
Because you see this guy is really strong, but
yeah,
who knows if that was really good information, or at least good for us at the time. All right, so I think another point that I wanted to discuss was sort of the difference between myth and reality, and it's a sort of a clear case in this, that people have bought into a myth, and and it's pretty easy to. It's very comforting, especially to people that may have practiced kung fu or a traditional martial art, to think that this godlike figure could beat anyone because he practiced similar things or had this sort of similar philosophy. So they'll buy into the myth. And also the fact that there's movies and this sort of story built around this guy to make people think that.
Yeah.
So, and I think we see the sort of myth of people and
but that just extends to really everything.
Yeah.
I mean, what we have, I think, eventually we're going to realize, like for the MMA fans, maybe we were dealing with the myth of Anderson Silva. That we deified our own guys. So maybe they weren't as good as
well, what would be good relative to other at the time.
Relative. So I think in Anderson Silva's case, for example, we know he wasn't phenomenal for MMA, but he was guys who were not nearly up to his skill level. But it wasn't that his skill level was so high. It was that he was
it's he was good enough to do it. Really sucked. So it's false. And he still is a guy. At the time, is a badass. Like, they make this story not based on the but it brings up an topic that is making decisions or basing your opinions based on emotion. We all do. But when we apply it to things like this, it actually has some detrimental effects. So, an example of that is decision based on emotion. The example of you've been trying to diet or whatever for a certain amount of time and you don't have the results that you wanted. So an emotional decision will be, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to binge now for 4 days. Something like that. That's going to get you for your goal. On emotion, based on the fact your body goes to a home place. Sometimes you don't get the fact. So now the decision based on emotion, not do you make other sort of emotional decisions when it comes to fitness? children in Africa signed up for right then. But I was glad I did. That was a good cause. So they put my emotions and decision. I'm being the sponsorship for the money. Well, apparently 76% that went fine with that. So yes, but I did make it based on emotion, found being okay because look, I'm exaggerating. Actually, research the company, and I want to get especially off of emotions all the time. So like how advertise, I was okay, I wasn't confident. This people do that all the time. So product advertising sort of accept advertising is to get people to example of for our life, especially as it applies to fitness. First start going to the gym.
Picture 2, slightly more hydrated.
So, for those who don't run for it, basically they are usually sometimes it can surprise. They lure you in by showing the before and after of people that have participated. You see that, like Ryan said, chunky, trick you can make people look better. I don't want to plays into the marketing aspect of it. I don't want to talk about this transformation in general. They could be good, but for the most part, I think it's
It's not just misleading. know, okay, after 12 weeks,
So here's the thing. We actually did an episode a while back on something that a body transformation, but it was a contest. It removed the story it got off. So would you say that's a little different? But that's basically transforming your body into something really measured. Well, you learn to do something.
I think the problem is that program that can
going to throw to it is that these are vehicles for a business, right? Whether it's EAS, that's doing or like whatever loser, right? They're advertisements, selling supplements, or selling a product, or they're trying to get whatever. This is a business first and foremost, right? So that's not once again. I think that if you are considering, even though some of them don't think, right? But anybody looking at it, you're going to use your before and after. There are results. Sell the product, right? So realize those that it is business to begin with.
And ask the trainer. Yeah, full on minus actual baby steps.
Right. So, question comes from Jane. Jane, I've been a personal trainer for 10 years. I find that people hire based on product instead of experience or knowledge. How do I handle this?
So integrity, and that was kind of built in as far as for buying sessions or do that, but you don't necessarily. But I know
do. But I think you talk about it. Just being actually don't have or not all go on artist musician charge pretty low prices like $2 an hour and like say, oh, $20, like what's the difference? Someone well, then I guess it really does. But do people believe that all I need to trade me people will charge rates, that may not be that high, but I think they but very good. Like some, even though people are uncomfortable, physically, when you're for yourself, I found the word of mouth is
out there
I'll end with this.
so
Yeah. Under him, but it was and I actually learned Jeremy his that I actually right. And if you're gonna train with me, it's gonna be a I want you to make the decision without being on the clock. I want you to make it freely. If you with me, I can afford to give you one session, an hour for months, years, and I do that sometimes. Now, I know someone where like recording session for oftentimes for a 1 hour lesson, I'll give you their big discount rate if I have to travel a lot, or I'll just. Is that a good concept? Do you think?
Yeah, because I think money to do something we love to do. At least, even though I know I'm